Coogs House. All right, so on Tuesday, we figured out some different landing spots for a handful of Cougars, including one running back we've been tracking very, very closely. Yeah, that's where he's going.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. If you are back with us, we appreciate you making your first listen today wherever you find us. Today, we are brought to you by Bird Dogs. More on that later, but our newest buddies at Bird Dogs have some special deals for you to talk about later. Again, welcome back to the YouTube channel. We are approaching 1,250 subscribers, doing a giveaway every 250. The next of which is at 1,250. You're going to get a hat just like the one I got on right now. So if you're on the video, you can see it, but it's got the little Cougar on the front, the Locked on the side, the Nike Dry Fit, all that kind of stuff. Very, very comfortable hat for whatever you're doing. Just make sure you hit subscribe, like, and comment to get entered in that contest. If you're looking for something to say after talking about a bunch of Cougars and where they're landing in their next spots, and that maybe doesn't have you in that best of mood, you're looking for something to say, tell us what kind of apples you like, red or green. All right, so today we're going to talk about where Cougars are going. Specifically going to start on the gridiron. One notable exodus from the football team that we've talked about a lot. Alton McCaskill made his decision on Tuesday afternoon, evening. And then we're going to talk about after the NBA draft lottery. Do we know where a couple of Houston Cougar basketball players might end up or have any more clarity there? So kind of jumping all over the alumni today. But let's start with Alton McCaskill. Now, Alton McCaskill, remember, was a freshman of the year in the American Athletic Conference just about 18 months ago at this point. Ran for 960 yards and 16 touchdowns. Also, for what's worth, had 113 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. He was the newcomer of the year, freshman of the year in the American Athletic Conference. And he entered the transfer portal kind of at a shock to everyone. At 9 o'clock, it was like 9 o'clock at night, the tweets went out. It had been a month or so ago at this point. A little bit less, I guess. But remember, like, Dana was in the reports very shocked by it, kind of, humbled and like solemn about the whole thing. But immediately there was a local report saying he was entering the portal. And then within 10 minutes, there was a national report saying he was going to Colorado. And he made it official on Tuesday. In the morning, he posted that he was flying to Colorado, to Boulder. And then by Tuesday late evening, he had a full video film pushed out with him in the full uniform and being on the mountainside looking out at the city and and all those kinds of things. Seemed very much orchestrated by one Coach Prime. We've talked for a minute here about how Coach Prime is kind of poaching these kids and how this like large NIL following that, like, I guess Prime technically does not go out and get, but that people associate with him, and then he takes to his program wherever he goes. With all of that, it's leading to a bunch of guys ending up there for things what appear to be NIL money. I think a lot of people took this kind of as a gut punch with Alton. He was just less than a week before entering into the portal, talking about being super, super grateful for the linking Cougs deals with the law firms they'd been working on. He was a, top-end running back coming into the Big 12 next season. Looked like he'd have a lot more NIL deals throughout the city of Houston had he stayed. It was a changing of the guard at offensive line coach, and things are going to shift because Amon Yagavi is also going to be the run game coordinator. Things are going to help him out a lot, a little bit more downhill running, a little bit more emphasis on the run game as well. And instead, Coach Prime has got him through what I'm sure will be a lot of NIL deals that whether or not Prime has any deal with, I guess, but they're following him around. Gets into Colorado. A lot of excitement in that program. We noted before that they have cut ties with over 50 of their own guys in the last transfer portal window alone. That's a lot. 85 scholarship guys that cut ties to over 50, including several players who had just transferred in to play for Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, in January. Guys were there less than a semester before getting out of there, and Alton McCaskill thinks that's the place to go, apparently. For what it's worth, I think it's an interesting move on the football field as well, not just from the larger cultural landscape. Colorado has brought in Kavosi Smoke. I was about to say Smith. Kavosi Smoke from Kentucky. They also have a 3-star freshman, Anthony Hankerson, and a 4-star freshman named Dylan Edwards. That's a 4 running back room, and they all ought to play if I'm looking at their roster, frankly. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. Remember, Colorado was just 1-11 in the Pac-12 last year, and while they've changed over their entire roster and coaching staff as well, Deion brought a lot of his dudes. It's an uphill battle for Colorado, and it's interesting to see this happen. I think the interesting thing from a Houston perspective, though, is this is the manifestation of those worst fears, right? We were worried about Deion Sanders, the NIL money coming into Houston and taking our guy. At the time, there was also this fear because Cameron Johnson and Javonte Sylvester, Cameron being like the best interior offensive lineman in the entire transfer portal who left Houston. Well, he's best in the portal, and he also did leave Houston, I should say. There was this fear that since they were taking their trips to Colorado around the same time, that all 3 might end up at Colorado now. That's not quite what happened. Cameron ended up actually going to Missouri to follow Brandon Jones. And so it's interesting to look at this as far as like what is Houston doing. There was, again, that real fear that they were all going to Colorado. I still do worry about this idea that guys are following Deion to Colorado as a Houston front that's clearly following the charisma of the coach, even if it's not directly tied to it, right? Because the NIL money is the thing following around. So even if they're just chasing NIL money, then NIL money follows Deion for a different reason. Now, I'm not saying Alton McCaskill will not be successful there. If anything, a guy came off a major knee injury that missed an entire year of college football last season. I kind of understand wanting to go share the load and carries. I just wonder if he could have done that here. I mean, Parker Jenkins is going to be a great fresh running back for Houston next season. Got returning offensive line like Jack Freeman and Patrick Paul on the left side. On the right side, you got Tank Jenkins. Like, you got some guys you could run behind, too, as far as the starting lineup goes. And, man, I just think this is an interesting move, to say the least. And I don't mean to say I wish ill on Alton. Frankly, I hope Alton does great at Colorado and plays on Sundays. I'm not the kind of guy that ever roots ill on a kid or whatever. It's just an interesting move because it's opened up entirely because of both the transfer portal and its NIL landscape, and it wouldn't have happened 3 or 4 years ago. So it's just trying to process how these things work. You know, he appears to be very happy with Colorado, and for whatever reason, that was the crystal ball within minutes of him entering the portal. And so this was probably the plan all along. Now, once he got a lot of backlash, both from his former teammates and from things like Twitter. Remember that episode? Everydayers nodding, because a couple weeks ago we talked about all the Twitter fingers going back and forth. For what it's worth, Alton McCaskill did take other visits, did entertain other offers, said on this for a couple weeks before ultimately committing to Colorado. So he at least played the game with folks. Now, the pessimist in me wants to point out that if he didn't play the game, he might be in a little bit more trouble, but that's the way things go. Man, anyway, losing a running back to Deion Sanders, aka Coach Prime, and all things going on in Colorado just makes Houston one of many schools right now losing somebody to that program. But it also is just a weird vibe. He was a lifelong guy for Jackson State until he wasn't. I don't know why people assume he'll do the same at Colorado, and they haven't even done it on the field yet. Interesting program and move for sure. Now, there are some interesting things going on in the NBA with a couple other Cougar alumni, and we want to get to those in a second, including Jairus Walker and Marcus Sasser, where they could end up in the NBA draft after the draft lottery just happened. But first, let's talk about something else interesting. That is Bird Dogs. Now, Bird Dogs are our newest sponsor here at the Locked On Podcast Network. They are exciting because as I've got some on right now, I can tell you right now, I both look and feel better wearing Bird Dogs. They got stretchy fabric. They make my legs, and they make my giant legs. I'm a former. I played some D-line myself. They can make my legs look comfier. They have comfy shorts and pants for all shapes and sizes. They're one pair of shorts, one pair of pants. I only have to wear one thing to the golf course, meetings, dates. I wear that. I wore mine in a hot tub a couple 10 days ago. These are really, really great and comfortable product. Frankly, they're great for sitting here leisurely on a Tuesday night recording a podcast in the corner of a room. They're great for standing at the front of a classroom and looking professional while teaching a class. Tell you from experience there. They're also great for oh crap, I got to stop at the gym on the way home because it's been a couple days. And they still have the same flexibility and sweat wicking fabric to get the job done there. I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy them. You need to go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Tell them that we sent you, and they will send you a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. That's right. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and get a free Bird Dogs branded Yeti style tumbler with every single order. Trust me, tell them we sent you. You're going to enjoy them. Go get comfortable today. All right, so I mentioned that we're going to talk some about the NBA draft because, frankly, that's a little bit happier, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. The NBA draft lottery was Tuesday night, and I think the interesting thing is Houston's got a couple guys that are in the NBA draft or projected to be in the NBA draft in, I guess it's, about a little over a month at this point. And we kind of got more clarity on where they may end up. Now, the draft lottery order went San Antonio number 1, Charlotte number 2, Portland number 3, the Rockets number 4, Detroit number 5. And I think that's kind of where we need to start this conversation, is it looks like Jairus Walker may end up kind of in that area in and of itself. Now, I have to say what's interesting there is the Houston Rockets are also in that area, right? So there's a real opportunity here that you're going to see potentially the Houston Rockets debating drafting one Jairus Walker. And frankly, Jairus Walker would pair up great with Jabari, and it's been showing up in, the NBA Combine itself. The NBA Draft Combine is happening this week. Jairus Walker measured at 6'6.5", 249 pounds, the 5th heaviest guy there, with a 7 foot 2.5-inch wingspan, the 7th longest wingspan at the combine, a 38-inch max vert, so like a one-step vert, which is the 10th best, a 34.5-inch standing vert, no momentum, which was the 4th best. He ran the 3/4 court sprint in 3.2 seconds, which is the 11th fastest in the entire combine, and the lane agility, which is a box drill type thing around the basketball lane, in 10.89 seconds, which is the 14th highest or 14th best time at the combine. So he's one of the fastest, most explosive, and heaviest guys at the combine. This is akin to a in much better shape Zion Williams as far as his numbers go at the combine. And we've both seen the way he plays basketball. He's got a tremendous amount of skill, hyper competitive on the defensive end. And frankly, while he's kind of raw in some areas, I know that that kind of meant that he had to have some growing pains with Kelvin Sampson. He is a great pro prospect, and I think the Houston Rockets would be silly to pass him up at number 4. I frankly kind of feel the same way about the Portland Trail Blazers. I kind of feel like after looking at this combine at the NBA draft lottery that it feels fairly safe that he's going to end up at one of those 4, 5, 6 spots, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots, I should say. So 3 is the Blazers. That would pair him up with Jeremy Grant. They got Damian Lillard playing the point guard. That means on both wings, you'd have big, strong, long guys that can shoot the 3 ball and move and play defense, kind of cover a lot of different positions there to surround Damian Lillard with. The Rockets at 4 could pair him with Jabari Smith, have hyper switchable forwards, a little bit of fire and ice. Both guys can shoot the 3 ball well. Both guys can swap around on defense. And frankly, for what it's worth, Alperen Şengün, as not the best rim defender because of some length limitations in the back behind them, they could put Jarace out there and have 2 different rim protectors at the 2 forward spots. Great fit for him there. I like him in Detroit at 5, and I'd be surprised if he fell past Detroit at 5. Detroit at 5 has obviously Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, more in the guard type guys. They don't have that more traditional forward. They just traded and went out and got, I believe it's Wiseman, right, from Golden State. So they've got options at the interior. So an exterior forward like that makes a ton of sense for them. The Magic got a lot of length. They may be looking more at point guard, but then he won't fall past the Indiana Pacers. Put him out there with Benedict Mathurin and put him out there with Tyrese Halliburton. He's going to be in that window for sure. I think he should be a Houston Rocket. I think not just for keeping things close to home. I think the rim protection he offers as a forward paired with Jabari Smith makes a ton of sense there. There will always be trading and movement. I mean, there's already people talking on Twitter like the Hornets might not want to sit at 2 because the number 2 projected player is a point guard and they have LaMelo Ball who's also a point guard or whatever. So we'll see. But man, I feel like Jarace just had a really good host of options open up at 3, 4, 5 spot. And again, I don't think he falls past 7 either. Really, really good outcome for him because those teams all need forwards. And frankly, even if you have him lumped in there with the Thompson brothers and Brandon Miller, I have him above Brandon Miller. We both saw him shut Brandon Miller down, keep Brandon Miller from hitting a field goal in that Alabama game in December. But we'll talk about more of that between now and the draft, I'm sure. Truthfully, there's 4 teams in that window, and they all need a forward, and he's one of those guys. So there's no potential Aaron Rodgers kind of drop here. Aaron Rodgers kind of drop here, whereas he's just sitting there waiting in the green room. Those are all spots he could end up very, very easily. Good outcomes for him. Maybe not the best for the Rockets, maybe not the best for the city of Houston outside of Jarace, but certainly great options for him there. Further, if Houston or some team were to try and swap up into 2 for Charlotte, get that 2 pick, it still alleviates other options in the background. Charlotte could obviously, if they and like Houston just swapped, could theoretically still take him at 4. He would fit in well there too. They have less pieces to build around, but they do have a point guard in LaMelo. Someone to set up Jarace and like the pick and roll kind of stuff would be really, really great. Good. Again, I was, as a Houston Cougar fan, very, very happy with the way that broke down for him. It was kind of weird to have both hats on. I was obviously the Rockets guy. I kind of want to see them getting them 1 pick. But it was interesting having both those hats on because as it was shaking, I was like, oh, he's got a bunch of options here. And that's really, really great. So good news on him. And the third segment talks about where Marcus Sasser is going to go. So let's jump in and talk about where Sasser getting up at the back end of this, because the way the draft lottery works is you're looking at, do any of these teams in the top 10 have later picks, and how could they play those off of one another? I mentioned Indiana pick 7. And at 7, there are a handful of like 6'4", 6'5" guys. I guess they wanted a guard. But truthfully, they could get one of those forwards I just mentioned. Right? They could get a Thompson twin. They could get Brandon Miller if he fell that far. They could get Jarace. They could get there's a 6'7" kid from Arkansas, Anthony Black, right? They get a handful of guys there, which means that at their 27th and 29th pick, which are at the end of the first round, they have via some trades, they're looking for more of a point guard spot, a 6-man spot, and that's kind of the next hole for them to fill because they have Miles Turner, have Tyrese Halliburton, drafted Benedict Mathurin a year ago. And I think Indiana at those 27 and 29 spots, because they have the 7th spot at the top end of the draft, is a perfect fit for Marcus Sasser. For what it's worth, he could be kind of a 6-man off the bench as a rookie. I think that's his maybe long-term role, although I think he could start for a good team. I think because he measured in himself, let's get to his measurements, at 6'1" and a quarter inches with a 6'7" wingspan. That's a pretty positive wingspan. Standing inverted 27 inches. I think, he still obviously had the major groin injury just a couple months ago at this point. So he's obviously probably still rehabbing a little bit off that. He ran a 3/4 court 3.43, which was fairly good for the guards. But again, Jarace went 3.2. That's how crazy Jarace was. But the impressive conditioning thing from Marcus was his lane agility. He ran 10.68, which was the 2nd fastest in the entire combine. And then the real show for him was also that in shooting drills, they have a stationary shooting drill and a movement shooting drill. He hit 80% or 20 out of 25 in both drills. In the stationary, that was good for 2nd, and in the movement drill, that was 1st. That is incredible, tremendous, and might have made him some money, right? Because going into the weekend, people were kind of wondering, is Marcus Sasser a late 1st or an early 2nd round pick? And with that kind of shooting, display, plus the fact that he shot over 40% the last 2 seasons from behind the arc, I think that solidifies him as a late first-round pick at the worst. You might even see him go as early as Memphis at 25. Memphis dealing with John Morant out for suspension for who knows how long. Needs some scoring in the backcourt. Dylan Brooks ain't it. Tyus Jones ain't it. They got to find some sort of a guard to score the basketball. Marcus Sasser has shown he can score the basketball. Would not be a bad flyer for them at the 25th pick. I think Indiana is going to use that top end pick at 7 for one of these forwards, as opposed to if that pick had fallen to like 10, 11, 12, they might have gotten a guard at it. But now they're high enough to get a forward. I think their 27, 29 pick, they will find some way to get a guy like Sasser, a guard that can come in and play right away. And the fit there on the floor, and I guess I alluded to this earlier, Halliburton's a 6'5", 6'6" point guard in the middle, right? Nembhard is good on offense, but not Marcus Sasser on offense, right? You have Halliburton distributing with, on one side, Benedict Mathurin, a 6'6" offensive juggernaut, sharpshooter himself, and then Marcus Sasser at 6'1" and change on the other side is the other shooter. And then you got guys like Miles Turner on the inside. Defensively, though, being able to play with Halliburton means that Sasser can cover the other team's shortest guy because Halliburton's 6'5" and change, right? So like suddenly he doesn't have to guard the other team's 2 guard, but can operate as that shooting guard off ball spot on the offense. Not that he can't lead the offense as a second unit guy, 6 man. I think his versatility is why I like him in that spot. But getting to do both those things is really, really good for him. And that's my initial read on where I think he lands. It's a great fit at like the 27th pick. Being a first round guy means he gets a contract. He gets to go. I mean, it might be a 2-way contract, but he's in the program. He's in the system. Indiana's a team on the rise. I really like what they're doing. Rick Carlisle coaches defense the same way and the same intensity, I should say. Different styles, different schemes, but same kind of intensity as Kelvin Sampson, which we know Marcus Sasser does very, very well. Really, really think it fits. I also think Indiana has shown, like in getting guys like Halliburton or Sabonis, in years past, or Turner, they like guys that know how to hoop. Oh, I just moved my desk around. You see that? They like guys that know how to hoop. And for what it's worth, every report from the scrimmages indicate that Marcus Sasser dominated the scrimmages. So I think it feels safe to say that he helped himself over the weekend, and Indiana's landing spot actually may have helped him find his as well. If you've got other thoughts on where those guys go in the after the combine in the draft, now that the order is set, or if you have thoughts on where Alton McCaskill is going, make sure you follow me at Painsworth512, PAINSWRTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, and all of your favorite social media handles. I'll be happy to talk with you there about him. You can also comment down below. May get back to you depending on what you have to say. So make sure you comment down below and tell me what you think. Thank you all so much for tuning in and making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. I'm going to recommend Locked On Rockets as your second listen of the day because while I'm upbeat about the way the draft order came out for the Houston Cougars, I think Jackson's feeling a little bit differently about it for the Houston Rockets. Go check that out. Go vent with him. It's still the city of Houston. It's still us. It's just not quite the same program. So make sure you go check that out as well. Again, Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.